Hey, you men who think you're fine, but when night comes, you can't sleep. Trevor Phillips here. Highway tonight. Long stretch of asphalt, empty enough to make a man hear himself think. That's why I like it out here. City streets have too many distractions, too many lights, too many faces, too many excuses. Out here, it's just the road, the horizon, and whatever you've been carrying around pretending it doesn't weigh anything. And yeah, I'm gonna say the word you hate. Failure. Not the Instagram kind. Not the I failed but I learned kind. Not the kind that ends with a motivational quote and a discount code. I mean the kind of failure you don't talk about. The kind you confess to yourself in the dark. When your phone is face down and your pride finally shuts up for 5 seconds. Tonight is a confession. Mine, and probably yours too, if you're honest. Because men don't really fear failing at work. They don't really fear failing at money. They fear failing at the thing nobody can see. Becoming the man they promised themselves they'd become. That's the real failure, the silent one. And it doesn't happen in one explosion. It happens in tiny decisions, tiny surrenders until one day you look around and realize you've been living on autopilot, calling it responsibility. So here it is. My confession. I didn't fail because I was stupid. I failed because I thought being hard was the same as being strong. I thought if I stayed angry, nobody could hurt me. I thought if I stayed wild, nobody could control me. I thought if I lived like I didn't care, then nothing could touch that soft part under the ribs, the part men pretend they don't have. Turns out, that soft part doesn't disappear. You can cover it with noise, violence, money, sex, power, whatever poison you prefer, but it stays there, waiting. And one day, it collects interest. Here's the thing about failure. It's not just losing, it's lying. Lying to your friends, lying to your family, lying to your woman, lying to the mirror, saying I'm good when you're not, saying it's fine when it's not, saying I don't care when you care too much. Most men aren't destroyed by the world. They're destroyed by the stories they tell themselves to survive the world. I told myself I was a survivor, and maybe I was. But a survivor is just someone who keeps breathing. A man is someone who chooses a direction. That's the difference. A lot of you are survivors right now. Breathing, working, pain, smiling enough to not scare people. But you're not choosing anything. You're just reacting. And reaction is where dreams go to die. Let me tell you the highway truth. The road doesn't care how you feel about where you're going. It only cares which way your wheels are pointed. You can be sad going nowhere. You can be angry going nowhere. You can be good going nowhere. Still nowhere. That's how failure sneaks in. It looks like normal days stacked on top of each other until your life becomes a routine you hate, but can't imagine escaping. The worst part? You get used to it. You start defending it. You start calling your cage stability. That's the moment you become a failed man. Not when you lose money, not when you lose a job, not when your woman leaves. When you start protecting the thing that's killing you because it's familiar. So here's my confession, continued. I hurt people. Not always with fists, not always with weapons, sometimes with words, sometimes with absence, sometimes with the cold kind of selfishness that comes from a man who thinks admitting he needs love makes him weak. I pushed away the people who cared. I surrounded myself with people who feared me because fear feels like control. And control is a fake version of safety. You know what real safety is? Being able to tell the truth without being punished for it. Most men don't have that. Not even in their own head. So they build identities instead. The provider, the tough guy, the funny one, the reliable one, the one who never needs help. And then they drown inside those identities. I failed like that. I confused being untouchable with being respected. But nobody respects a man who's just loud. They only respect a man who can be honest and still stand. Here's the part of the confession where you might start squirming because it's going to sound familiar. I was scared. Scared of being ordinary. Scared of being forgotten. Scared of being the man people tolerate instead of the man they choose. So I did what scared men do. I made noise. I burned bridges before anyone could leave me. I insulted people before they could judge me. I acted insane so nobody would look close enough to see the truth, that I wanted a life that felt meaningful. And I didn't know how to build it. That's failure, not weakness confusion. A man can handle pain. Men are built for pain. Pain is simple. Pain has rules. What men can't handle is meaninglessness. Meaninglessness is the slow poison. You can survive it for years, even decades, and still look fine from the outside. But inside, you start rotting. You start needing distractions. You start chasing stimulation. You start hunting pleasure like it's oxygen. Food, porn, alcohol, gambling, endless scrolling, anything to avoid sitting in silence long enough to hear your own disappointment. And then the night comes, and you can't sleep because your mind is the only thing you can't outrun. So, here's the first truth I want to hand you. Like a knife with the handle facing your side, you are not tired. You are disappointed. Disappointed in yourself. In what you tolerated. In what you postponed. In what you never said. In what you never tried. And disappointment becomes resentment. Resentment becomes rage or numbness. And either one will wreck your life if you pretend it's not there. But tonight isn't just a confession. It's an agreement. If you're listening, you're part of it. So let's make it real. My confession isn't, I failed. My confession is this. I knew what was wrong, and I avoided fixing it because fixing it would force me to change. That's what men do. They don't fear the problem. They fear the transformation. Because transformation costs you things. It costs you comfort. It costs you identity. It costs you people who liked the old you because the old you was easier to control. And you know what? I didn't want to pay that price, so I paid a different price. I paid with relationships, with trust, with sleep, with peace. I paid with the inside of my chest feeling like an empty room. Now, you're probably thinking, Trevor, what's the point? What's the solution? Slow down. Confessions come before solutions. Because if you can't admit the truth, any solution you try is just decoration on the same failure. So here's the end of part 1. On this highway, at night, with nothing but distance ahead, I'm telling you the first thing a man has to admit to, stop being a failed man. You didn't end up here. You chose it. Maybe not consciously, maybe not proudly, but by default, by avoidance, by silence, you chose it. And that's good news, because if you chose it, you can choose something else. In the next part, I'm going to talk about the lie that keeps men stuck. I don't have a choice. And I'm going to rip it open the way this road rips open the dark. So, the lie that keeps men stuck in the same life until they wake up old and angry. I don't have a choice. You say it like it's a fact, like gravity, like death. I don't have a choice, Trevor. I have responsibilities. I don't have a choice. I have a family. I don't have a choice. I can't start over. I don't have a choice. This is just how it is. Yeah, I've said it too. And here's the confession inside that confession. When a man says, I don't have a choice, what he really means is, I'm scared of the cost. Because you always have a choice. You just don't like the options. Choice doesn't mean comfort. Choice doesn't mean the easy path. Choice means you pick which pain you're willing to live with. That's adulthood, not bills, not a job title, not a ring on your finger, choosing pain on purpose. Most men don't do that. Most men let pain choose them, and then they act like victims of a life they built by default. Look, I get it. The highway makes everything feel dramatic. You see the light stretching out, and you start thinking about all the exits you didn't take. But this isn't drama. This is math. You're trading your life for something, every day. So what are you buying? Because if you're buying a life you hate, you're getting robbed. Let's talk money again. Because money is where most men hide their fear. You tell yourself you can't change because you need the paycheck. Because you need stability. Because you can't risk the family's security. That sounds noble. Sometimes it is. But here's the darker truth. A lot of men aren't providing for their family. They're paying ransom for their own peace. They're paying ransom to avoid conflict. Paying ransom to avoid being judged. paying ransom to avoid hearing the sentence they're terrified of, "You're not enough." So they work harder, longer. They stay in jobs they hate because at least the job gives them a role where they feel useful. And you know what the job gives back? A number, a salary, a bonus, a good work email. And for a while that number feels like respect, feels like control, feels like proof you matter. But the number never fills the hole. It just keeps you busy enough not to look into it. That's the trap. Money is a tool. But for a lot of men, money becomes a religion. And religions demand sacrifice. You sacrifice time, health, presence, connection. And then you call yourself a good man because you suffered. But here's the part that'll make you angry. Suffering doesn't make you good. It makes you predictable. Predictable men are easy to exploit. Now let's move to trust. Because trust is where no choice becomes a chain. You trust the wrong people because you want to believe loyalty will save you. You want to believe being decent will be rewarded. You want to believe the world has rules. And when the world breaks those rules, you don't adapt. You double down. You keep trusting. You keep forgiving. You keep being the bigger man. Because if you stop, you'll have to admit you were wrong about someone. You'll have to admit you wasted years. And that hurts, so you keep paying the cost. Because admitting the cost feels worse than the cost itself. That's sunk cost, not just money, but time, identity, pride. A man will stay loyal to a dead friendship because he doesn't want to admit he picked the wrong brother. A man will stay loyal to a disrespectful partner because he doesn't want to admit he chose wrong. A man will stay loyal to a family member who uses him because he's terrified that saying no makes him a bad son. I don't have a choice, he says. No, you have a choice. You just don't want to be the villain in someone else's story. And that right there is a confession you need to make to yourself. A lot of you aren't stuck. You're just addicted to approval. Now marriage. Let's do it. Let's step on that landmine. Marriage is where the no choice lie gets dressed up as honor. I can't leave. I made a vow. I can't change. I have kids. I can't speak up. It'll cause problems. Problems already exist. You're just postponing them. You're using silence as a painkiller. And like any painkiller, you need more of it over time. So you get quieter. You lower your standards. You stop asking for respect. You start negotiating with your own dignity like it's optional. And your partner learns something dangerous. They learn you'll tolerate almost anything. Not because you're strong, because you're afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of losing your identity. Afraid of paying child support. Afraid of starting over. Afraid of telling your parents the marriage failed. Afraid of looking like a man who couldn't keep a family together. So you stay, and you slowly become the kind of man who's there but not present. The kids feel it. The partner feels it. The house feels it. And then one day, your partner says, "You're not the man I married." Yeah, because the man they married had hope. Hope dies in silence. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not telling you to blow up your marriage, or telling you to stop pretending you don't have choices inside it. You can choose to tell the truth. You can choose to set a boundary. You can choose to demand respect. You can choose counseling. You can choose a plan. You can choose to leave if the disrespect continues. Those are choices. But they come with a cost. And that cost is what you've been avoiding. So here's my confession about no choice. I used it as an excuse to stay the same. I used it to justify my worst habits. I used it to justify my anger. I used it to justify hurting people before they could hurt me. No choice, I said. It was a lie. I had choices. I just wanted the outcome without the discomfort. And now your confession. If you're brave enough to admit it, when you say, "I don't have a choice," what are you protecting? Your comfort? Your reputation? Your fear of being judged? Your addiction to stability? Because a man who refuses to choose becomes a man who's chosen for. Chosen by his boss. Chosen by his partner. Chosen by his family. Chosen by the world. And then he calls himself unlucky. He's not unlucky. He's passive. Now look, this is the part where you want me to give you some heroic speech about taking your life back. I'm not doing that. I'm giving you something colder and more useful. Write down the price you're paying to avoid change. Seriously. Sleep, health, respect, joy, connection, self-respect. And then ask yourself, is this price worth the comfort I'm buying? Because if you can see the price, you can stop pretending you're stuck. Stuck is a story. Price is real. And when a man sees the price clearly, he either changes or he finally admits he's choosing the cage, which is still a choice. In the next part, I'm going to talk about what happens when men keep choosing the cage. The two endings, numbness and rage. The slow decay. The sudden crash. And then I'll tell you the only way out that doesn't turn you into a monster. So what happens when you keep paying the price? When you keep choosing the cage because it's familiar, and you keep telling yourself you're doing it for responsibility, for peace, for the family, for stability. Two endings? That's it. Men don't have 1,000 endings. They have two. Numbness or rage. And here's my confession. I've lived both. Numbness is the quiet ending. It's the respectable one. The one nobody calls a crisis. You still go to work. You still show up. You still do the minimum to keep the image alive. You still laugh when you're supposed to. You still say, I'm fine, like it's a greeting. But your inner world shuts down. It's like turning off the lights in a house you still live in. You stop dreaming because dreaming hurts. You stop wanting because wanting reminds you that you settled. You stop trying because trying risks disappointment. And a man who stops trying becomes a ghost. He's there, but he isn't there. His eyes lose that sharpness. His voice loses that weight. He becomes softer. Not in a good way, in a drained way. Like a battery that's been dying for years. He doesn't even feel sad anymore because sadness requires hope. Sadness is grief for something you cared about. Numbness is worse. Numbness is when you don't care enough to grieve. And people love numb men because numb men are easy to live with. They don't argue. They don't push back. They don't demand respect. They don't make anyone uncomfortable. They just exist. And that's the tragedy. The world will reward you for disappearing. Your boss will say you're reliable. Your family will say you're stable. Your friends will say you're chill. And inside, you'll feel like you're suffocating in slow motion. Now, rage is the loud ending. Rage is what happens when numbness can't hold anymore. When the pressure builds so high that your good man mask cracks in public. Rage isn't always screaming. Sometimes it's sarcasm that turns cruel. Sometimes it's contempt. Sometimes it's a cold look that scares people more than yelling ever could. You want to know how rage starts? With resentment. Resentment is the smoke that tells you the fire is already burning. You resent your boss because you gave years and got crumbs. You resent your wife because you feel unseen. You resent your kids because they need you and you feel trapped. You resent your friends because they stopped calling. You resent strangers because their happiness feels like an insult. And then you resent yourself for resenting them. That's the loop. And that loop is where a lot of good men become dangerous in the wrong way. Not dangerous like violence. Dangerous like destruction. They start self-sabotaging. They cheat not because they found love, but because they want to feel alive for 5 minutes. They drink not because they like the taste, but because they want silence in their head. They gamble not because they're stupid, but because losing money feels more honest than living numb. They pick fights over nothing because conflict is easier than confession. Because confession would require them to admit, I hate my life. And that sentence is terrifying because once you admit it, you can't unknow it. So you avoid it. And avoidance becomes failure. That's the real confession about failure. It's not one moment. It's a habit. It's the habit of avoiding the truth until the truth shows up like a truck in the dark. Now, here's the part you're going to resist because it removes your favorite excuse. Numbness and rage are not what life did to you. They're what you did to yourself by refusing to choose, by refusing to speak, by refusing to set standards, by trading your dream for comfort and then acting shocked when comfort turns into a cage. I know this because I did it. I built cages for other people and for myself. I thought control would save me. I thought if I could dominate the room, nobody could hurt me. I thought if I was unpredictable, nobody could trap me. And you know what that got me? Loneliness. Because fear doesn't create loyalty. Fear creates distance. People don't love what they fear. They tolerate it. They manage it. They wait for it to go away. That's another kind of failure. Being surrounded by people and still feeling alone. Now let's talk about being cornered. Because every man gets cornered. Cornered doesn't mean broke. Cornered doesn't mean homeless. Cornered doesn't mean your life is objectively terrible. Cornered means you feel like you can't breathe without permission. Cornered means every path feels like loss. If you speak up, you risk conflict. If you stay silent, you betray yourself. If you leave, you look like the bad guy. If you stay, you rot. That corner is where men break. And when men break, they usually pick the easiest escape, distraction. They bury themselves in work. They bury themselves in porn. They bury themselves in sports. They bury themselves in jokes. They bury themselves in the phone. They stay busy so they don't have to sit still long enough to hear the question that haunts them, is this it? And the highway is honest because it asks that question with every mile. Is this it? Is this your life? Just motion, no direction, just survival, no meaning? Now I'm not here to shame you. Shame is useless. Shame makes men hide. Shame makes men lie. Shame makes men defensive. I'm here to confess something that might make you stop lying. A lot of good men don't actually want peace. They want control, but they're too polite to admit it. They want control over how they're seen, control over the outcome, control over their image as the responsible one, control over being the hero in everyone's story. And because they can't control life, they control themselves instead. They shrink, they swallow, they compromise, they suppress, they call it maturity. It's not maturity, it's fear management. So what's the way out? Not rage, not numbness. The third option is the hardest one for men like you, disciplined honesty. Disciplined honesty is telling the truth early before you explode, before you disappear, before you start looking for sensation in places that will wreck your life. It's saying, I'm not okay, I'm not happy, this doesn't work for me, this is disrespect, this is my boundary, this is what happens if you cross it. And then this is the part that separates men from. Boys, you follow through calmly. No drama, no threats, no speeches, consequences, distance, changed behavior, a plan, a timeline, an exit if needed. Because a boundary without consequences is a joke, and you're tired of being the joke. Now in the next part, I'm going to give you the final confession and the blueprint. The confession, what I did when I realized I was the common denominator in my failures. And the blueprint, how a man rebuilds a broken dream without burning his whole life down, how to become solid instead of bitter. Because bitter men are loud, but solid men are dangerous in the right way. And you don't need to become a monster. You need to become a man who can't be casually disrespected. All right, last part. If you're still here, it means one of two things. Either you're angry because I'm saying things you've been trying not to hear, or you're relieved because someone finally said them without dressing it up like a self-help brochure. Both are fine. This is a confession, remember? And confessions aren't meant to be comfortable. Here's the final confession. The one that actually matters. I was the common denominator. Not life, not bad luck, not the system, not women, not society, not my childhood, not my stress, me. That's hard for men because blaming feels powerful. Blaming gives you a story where you're the victim of circumstances instead of the author of your choices. But blaming also keeps you stuck because you can't change what you blame. You can only change what you own. And owning it is terrifying because it means you can't hide behind excuses anymore. It means you have to look at yourself and say, I chose this. I tolerated this. I avoided that. I stayed quiet. I traded my dream for comfort. That sentence hurts, but it also unlocks something. Because if you chose it, you can choose something else. So here's the blueprint. 6 steps. No motivational nonsense. Just actions. The kind that actually pull a man out of numbness and out of rage. 1. Stop calling it who you are. Call it what you do. This one changes everything. Men stay stuck because they turn their habits into identity. I'm just not the confident type. I'm not good with confrontation. I'm not the kind of man who takes risks. I'm just tired. That's not identity. That's behavior. And behavior can change. So don't say, I am a failed man. Say, I've been acting like a man who's afraid. That's honest. And honesty gives you movement. 2. Pick one truth you've been avoiding and say it. Clean. Not as an insult. Not as a fight. Not as a dramatic moment. Clean truth. I'm not happy. I'm not okay with this. This is disrespectful. I feel alone. I need change. 1 sentence. No speech. No essay. No courtroom evidence. Just truth. Because most men don't lose their lives in one disaster. They lose them by never saying the truth out loud. 3. Create a boundary with a consequence you can actually enforce. A boundary is not a request. A boundary is not, please stop. A boundary is, if this happens, I do this. And the consequence has to be real. Something you can do without begging, screaming, or threatening. If someone insults you, end the conversation and leave. If someone keeps using you, stop giving. If someone keeps lying, stop trusting. If your job is killing you, set a timeline. Reduce dependence. Prepare your exit. No drama, just math. Because the moment you enforce consequences calmly, people learn you're not furniture anymore. 4. Fix the basics like your life depends on it, because it does. Listen, I know you want a big solution. Men love big dramatic solutions because they feel heroic. But rebuilding a life isn't heroic. It's boring. Sleep, food, movement, money, routine. A man who's exhausted can't think clearly. He can't choose. He can't lead himself. He can't rebuild anything. He'll call it depression, burnout, stress, whatever label makes it feel less like his problem. But your body is your engine. If the engine is trashed, the road doesn't matter. So start with basics. Sleep like it's a contract. Eat like you respect your future self. Move your body even when you don't feel like it. Cut down the things that numb you. Stop feeding the habit that's stealing your fire. You don't need motivation. You need discipline. 5. Rebuild the broken dream in a smaller form immediately. Here's what men do wrong. They think they have to rebuild everything at once. They think if they can't go full speed, they shouldn't move at all. That's ego. Rebuilding a broken dream starts tiny. If your dream was writing, write for 10 minutes. If it was fitness, walk for 20. If it was a business, research for 1 hour a day. If it was learning, study the basics again. If it was freedom, start removing 1 chain at a time. A dream doesn't come back with a lightning strike. It comes back with repetition. And repetition is how a man proves to himself he's not dead inside. 6. Accept the price. Some people will hate the new you. This is the part that stops most men. They want change without losing anyone. They want boundaries without conflict. They want standards without disappointment. They want to be respected without being disliked. Not happening. The moment you stop being convenient, the people who benefited from you being small will call you selfish. Let them. Being disliked by the wrong people is a sign you're finally growing a spine. Now 1 more confession, because I'm not letting you off easy. Most of you don't need a new life. You need a new relationship with discomfort, because discomfort is the doorway to meaning. If you can't tolerate discomfort, you'll keep choosing comfort, and comfort is the cage. So here's what I'll tell you. As the final highway truth, you don't escape failure by becoming perfect. You escape failure by becoming honest and consistent. Consistent men rebuild their lives. Inconsistent men stay stuck and call it fate. And if you're still waiting for permission to start over, permission to set boundaries, permission to admit you're unhappy, let me save you years. Permission doesn't come. Nobody hands it to you. You take it quietly, calmly, with discipline, with standards. That's how a man becomes solid. Not bitter, not cruel, not numb. Solid. And solid men don't need to scream. Their life speaks for them. Now I'm going to end the way I like. Ending cold, simple, and real. If this hits you, good. Don't turn it into a playlist in your head. Don't turn it into something to think about. Do one thing tonight. One truth. One boundary. One step toward the dream you buried. Because the highway keeps going whether you change or not. And the saddest kind of man is the man who keeps driving, with no destination, and calls it normal. Hey, you men who think you're fine, but when night comes you can't sleep. Now you know why. I'm Trevor Phillips. Keep driving. And here's your question, answer it in the comments like a man, not like a poet. What's the one truth you've been avoiding because you're scared of what it will cost you? Write it.